Hey guys, Jam here, and in today's video I'm going to be kit bashing up a Primaris Wulfen. But not any old just kind of standard Primaris sized Wulfen dude. I kind of wanted him to look like he's mid-battle and he's just starting to go a bit feral. The kind of Wulfen side is starting to take over, like I said, mid-combat, so he's not completely transformed yet. And now one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is actually because of this old artwork that I've seen many times, and it's always just kind of inspired me. I wanted that kind of more armored up, not the, you know, the kits that you can buy now with all the armor stripped off them and stuff like that. Like I said before, just starting to turn feral kind of vibe. So anyway, I'll quit yapping, let's get straight into it. Alright, so the first step was choosing a body for this, and obviously I had to go for an assault intercessor to, you know, get that movement and slightly more feral vibe to it. Now the first thing I need to do on this body is shave off the quilla on the chest. It's just kind of a general thing to do, Space Wolves, to give them a more like chunky, brutal look, and also leaves us space later to maybe green stuff in a necklace or something like that. So I just take my hobby knife and I slowly just start removing chunks of the quilla away, and then I kind of reverse the blade around and just slowly scrape the area down and just kind of make it nice and flat and smooth, kind of like sanding it but without sandpaper, I guess. I'm not going to go too hardcore with like being 100% even and smooth. I'm going to try and do it as good as I can, but like I said, later I'm going to be green stuffing over there as well, so it will be no problem. And as you can see on the screen right now, it turned out pretty well. Now obviously if you're going for a Primaris dude kind of werewolfing out, you need a face that's very yelly. So I got this face here, I thought it was quite perfect. But one thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just lightly shave down the mohawk on you, just so my green stuffing on there can be a bit more even later. Once again, just using my hobby knife for that. And one of the next steps, and probably the most important part of this entire model, is I wanted to get one complete kind of Wulfen arm from the Wulfen kit with no armor, nothing on it. So it really looks like he's busting out of his armor, but not completely yet. Now obviously these have cables coming out the back. I don't need that for this model, so I just snip that off. Now for the arm that's not going to be completely Wulfened out, all I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to remove the pistol from this, because later I want to put a Wulfen hand on there. Now with models like this, I usually like to get all the bits ready first and then use plastic glue to glue them all in together at the same time, because plastic glue, you've got a bit of wiggle room there. You've got a few seconds where you can kind of move things around, so I want the pose to make sense. So firstly I put the fully Wulfen arm on there, glue that in, and when I got that into the position that I want, I glue the hand on, because then I can move the hand to where I want it to be. And before that dries, I quickly glue on the armored arm and the Wulfen hand onto that arm once again, so this gives me a bit of wiggle room if I just want to kind of adjust the pose a little bit. And then I very quickly glue the head into place. Now I wanted the head to kind of be raised up a little bit into the air, so it almost looks like he's howling or screaming to the moon kind of vibe. So I did have to shave the back of the head a little bit, but basically just slapped it in, got into the position that I want, and let that all dry. Now that the base of the model's done, it's onto the green stuff. So whipped up a batch of 50-50 between the yellow and blue, just standard green stuff there, and I filled in the gaps on the fully Wulfen arm, or I should just refer to it as the left arm at this point. And yeah, I just wanted to fill in those gaps so I got a better base when I'm going to start putting the fur on top of there. Now I'm using my silicone color shapers to do this. They are probably the best tools for green stuff work. Definitely recommend getting a set of them. Now I've done an entire video dedicated to how to green stuff fur, and I'll link that up now, so go watch that if you want a more in-depth guide. But basically I'm going to be rolling kind of teardrop shapes of green stuff, and I'm going to be layering up the fur from the bottom to the top, so there's always fur overlapping it. And I'm doing this obviously because it covers up that gap / joint in the shoulder there, but also it shows more like fur and everything sprouting out of his armor and all that kind of stuff, and I think it works really well. As you can see on the screen right now, I think it works pretty well and really helps to kind of tie all the bits together. And now another thing I've probably shown on this channel a million times, to be a bit honest, I was actually thinking of not making any wolf based videos ever again, because I've done so many of them at this point, but I just really wanted to make this video. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going to use my green stuff and roll out a really thin green stuff kind of ropey bit, And once I get it to the size that I want, I just slap that onto the chest, and that's going to be the basis of my Wolfie necklace. Obviously, you want to keep an eye on which direction your model's going and everything, so you want the necklace kind of blowing in that way. And next step here, I just want to give this guy a kind of leather loinclothy thing, because I don't want to go for fur again, because I'm already doing fur on the shoulder. I'm going to be giving him hair. So I thought just a nice tattered bit of leather loinclothy bit will help bring this model together a bit more. So basically, I flatten my green stuff down. I use my paintbrush to kind of use it as a rolling pin, just to flatten it out to the thickness that I want, get a rough shape, and then just slap it onto the model. And now I'm just kind of playing around with how I want the leather to fold and flap around in the wind and stuff like that. But before I finish that off, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to glue a wolf skull to around like the belt buckle-y area and stuff like that, just to once again give a bit more of a wolfy feral vibe, but also just general interest. Just having a plain loincloth there might be a bit too boring for this dude. But yeah, right now the loincloth's looking way too flat and boring, so what I do is I use my tweezers and just kind of pull and tug certain areas on the edges, just to, one, it breaks that up and makes it look all rough, but also kind of helps you pull the green stuff into certain areas, and like I said, just looks like tattered leather once you've like ripped and stretched certain areas. And there you go, the loinclothy bit's done, and I've also slapped on a dagger, which I believe is either from the Thunderwolf Cavalry or the Wulfen kit. Again, just kind of getting more like bony runes and all that kind of stuff to get that more wolfy vibe to it. And it just kind of looked a bit boring in the front. Now onto probably the next most important part of this model, and that's the hair. Again, I've done this kind of stuff many times. You can go watch my Horus Heresy Space Wolves video. There's a lot of tips in there as well. But basically, I'm just rolling out really long, thin strands of green stuff, making sure it's really thin on the end. And first, I'm going to go for the beard, because obviously the hair might overlap over the top of the beard. So beard first. And then just work my way from the chin all the way up to the sideburns, just gradually going from longer to shorter bits of green stuff. And once you've got that all into place, never forget the good old moustache. You know, that really ties things together as well. To do that, basically the exact same thing, but just really small bits of green stuff. And as always, if you do not have these silicone tools, you can always use a wet toothpick for this. It always works just as well. Now, as you can see, I've got half of the hair already done, but I don't want it to look too flat. I wanted to get a few smaller strands in there, maybe just kind of flowing over the face, and just adding a bit more of a dynamic kind of roaring to the moon kind of pose, winds billowing through his hair. And personally, I always feel like those little strands of hair you put into that, like I said, go over the face, maybe rippling over one of the strands of hair or something like that, just adds that extra bit of realistic kind of dynamicness to the model, if that's even a word, and it's what makes it really pop. Personally, that's what I think anyway. Right, now that the hair's done, that was the most important and thing I've stressed out about the most, because obviously hair, you kind of have to think of how it would realistically flow, or it might look a bit weird. But yeah, last thing to do now is the teeth on the necklace, and I'm going to be putting a few runes in there as well. So first up, for the wolf teeth, what I do is basically I just roll up again kind of like a teardrop shaped bit of green stuff. I place it on the model, and then I just use a flat tool to flatten it, and I just take the tip and then I curve it upwards so it looks like a curved fang or a claw. And then when it comes to the rune, all I do is I roll up a ball of green stuff, put it where I want it to go, use my flat tool again to flatten it out. Then I use the sharp tip of my hobby knife to just kind of press in some sort of rune looking shape. Now the one on this one is not particularly good, but you can kind of just wing it and just make up any sort of shapes you want, really. Oh, and I did lie, there was actually one more thing to do with green stuff here, and that is to create little stringy bits that are kind of holding the fangs and the rune and stuff to the belt and whatever. So I use very thin rolled out bits of green stuff, and I just pop them into the little divvy holes I made on the teeth, just so it looks like it's hanging off a bit of wolf skull on his belt, so it kind of looks like it's tied onto the model and not just floating there. Rightio, this guy is done and dusted. Time for paint. Now, I primed this dude in black, and now I'm going to go for a bit more of a 40k color scheme with this dude. I usually go for the more Horus Heresy style, like the plain grey, But you know, I'm kind of feeling the more bluish grey. I'm going to go for obviously a darker version of what Games Workshop normally goes for, I think. So to start that off, I'm going to base coat this entire model with the Fang. Not being too neat with this step, obviously just making sure my paints are nice and thinned down, giving it a good few coats. Now obviously if I was doing an entire army like this, I'd just use my airbrush, but you know, not everybody has one, and this is just one model. Now this isn't exactly an in-depth painting guide, so I'm just going to kind of brush through it a little bit, but I'm going to block in the other colors now that the Fang base coat of the armor is done. So for the shoulder pad, I'm going to be blocking that in with Mephiston Red, and I'll be doing the same for the left knee pad as well. Now because it's just one model, I just want to kind of paint areas I want and get them done, because I just want to enjoy the model instead of kind of going through a speeding process. So instead of basing the rest of the like skin in that, I'm just going to carry on with the armor, and I use some Abaddon Black just to start creating chips along the armor. Now I probably over chipped this at one point, but you know, he's going feral, so maybe his armor is heavily damaged. So yeah, basically I'm just adding little spots and dots of black everywhere and a little bit of scratches, making little fine cuts along the armor and around the edges. And while I had the black out, I decided to paint in my pack markings. So Space Wolves don't have the usual kind of squad markings like Squad 1, Squad 2, that kind of thing. They'll have shapes and symbols. So for intercessors, the colors are red and black, and I'm just going to add a kind of sharp triangular, well, just a sharp triangle to his knee pad and to his shoulder plate. Just something really quick and simple for this video. And once those shapes were in place, I used the black again just to kind of chip around the red as well, just to kind of bring it in with the rest of the armor. So yeah, the next thing I wanted to do was get some Agrax Earthshade, and I'm just going to start pin washing all the recesses, or just as it's also known as a recess shade. So I'm just going to use a really fine pointed paintbrush, and I'm just going to drop that shade into all the recesses of the model, so the rest of the model can just kind of pop a bit more. And obviously sometimes with this you'll be a bit messy and get washed where you don't want it. So all I do later on off screen is I just go back to the Fang and I just kind of clean up any washy bits that I didn't want, or maybe some areas where I thought maybe I over chipped. So next I go straight in with Fenrisian Grey, and I use this kind of as an edge highlight, but I do a bit more of like a rough weathered chippy kind of highlight. So basically I'm not doing nice smooth long edge highlights, I'm just dabbing little bits here and there, especially at the corners where the light would hit it the most. And obviously I'm highlighting the chips, but just on the underside of it, so it looks like, gives it a bit more of a three-dimensional vibe. Yeah, the key to this whole thing is just adding a lot of texture and weatheredness to the model. So no smooth highlights anywhere on this. Now to be honest, I probably should have come in with Rust Grey to do this kind of highlight, and then use the Fenrisian Grey as more of a super edge corner bit kind of highlight, but I didn't own the Rust Grey and this is a one-off model, so I just thought I'd just make it extra poppy. And once that was all done, I highlighted the red up with Wild Rider Red. Once again, just under highlighting the black chips and adding a bit of nicks and scratches onto the black markings as well. Now that pretty much all the armor is done, I went on to base coat all the leather. So that'll be all the bags, the pistol holster, and also the leather loincloth. So the leather loincloth I'm going to do in Rhinox hide, and the rest of the leather on there is just going to be Mournfang brown. And for the bone on the model, I'll be base coating everything in Xandri dust. Then I just hit all of that with Agrax Earthshade. Now once that was all dried, I went back to the bone and I did kind of a layery highlight with Ushabti bone, just covering kind of most of the area but leaving the shadows in there. And once that was done, I did a more of an edge highlight with Screaming Skull to just get those bony bits just to pop a little bit more. And then going back to the leathery bits, not including the loincloth, I'll be highlighting up from Scrag Brown and then up to Deathclaw Brown. Now like I said before, I'm trying to add a lot of texture into this model, so I'm not doing very smooth highlights here. I do a bit more of a normal highlighty kind of vibe with Scrag Brown, but I definitely do a bit more of a weathered one when it comes into the Deathclaw one, to give it a much finer highlight with that. I definitely feel like recently I'm starting to find my own painting style a little bit more. I've always kind of just followed the general GW way, so base coat, washes, layers and edge highlights. But I'm starting to really enjoy a bit more of a textured, more loose kind of vibe to models. Obviously depends on the model, but yeah, it's just kind of what I'm enjoying at the moment. And saying that, I go to the loincloth now and I do a very scratchy edge highlight with Gorthor brown on this one. And this one in particular, I did a bit more stippling mixed in with the scratches as well to really give it that kind of like worn out, like weathered leather kind of vibe. Now finally onto the face, well, just skin in general and the hair. So obviously I'm going to start with the skin first because it's kind of underneath the hair, so I won't be able to mess things up as much. And I'm just going in with Kislev flesh, giving it a nice few thin coats throughout on this one. And then I go into the hair with Mephiston red. Now, to be honest, I kind of, on hindsight, maybe I should have gone for a black or something, give it a more wolfy feral look. But I wanted to go for that kind of over the top kind of Viking aesthetic where everybody's got like really orangey hair or they're blonde. And I thought going for the more reddish orange would be kind of fun. So I don't know, let me know at the end of the video which you think would have looked better. But anyway, so I base coat everything with Mephiston red. And once that's all dry, I shade the hair and the skin with Reikland flesh shade. And once that was all done, like I said, going for that really like orangey red head vibe, I do it pretty much all over a layery highlight with Troll Slayer orange on all of the hair. And then once that's done, I kind of just do right the tips of the hair or the parts that might catch most of the light, I go in with Fire Dragon Bright, just to give that model an extra little bit of pop. And as for the skin, I just go back in with Kislev flesh again, basically leaving in those shadows and just kind of highlighting up the raised areas of all the muscle and the fingertips and the cheekbones and stuff like that. And lastly for the skin, I go in with Flayed One flesh. Now this is a very fine highlight. I'm just focusing on the knuckles of the hands, like the really raised bits of the cheekbones, and some of the muscle areas as well. Once again, just giving the muscle that final pop. Now the final thing I really do on this model is just the metallics, but I won't really go over it because there's barely any here. I basically just use Lead Belcher and Balthasar Gold for the one small gold bit. And I kind of keep it a dark battered steel, so not much going on there. And that's pretty much the model painted, to be honest. There's a few small bits, like obviously I did the eyes, but I'm not going to show that on camera because I'm not very good at that. Bit of pink in the tongue and little bits here and there like painting the runes grey, but like I said, it's not really that important. But what is important is the basing. So I just painted the base a really nice light grey, dry brushed over with an even lighter grey, and then just slapped on Valhallan Blizzard all over. Not a very inspiring base, but like I said, if this was an entire army, I'd probably do something a bit more interesting, but it's a one-off dude, so it's good enough for now. So yeah, let's have a look at this model completely done. Well, there we have it, ladies and gents. There is my Primaris Wulfen dude done. And I think it turned out pretty well, to be honest. Maybe not as feral and maybe filled with gore as I feel like it maybe should have been. If I trusted myself enough with gore effects and blood, I'd probably slather this model up, but I don't want to ruin it. So, you know what they say? Perfect is the enemy of good. But anyway, most important thing is let me know what you think of this dude. And always comment below any other future Kitbashes you'd like me to try out. To be honest, I would love to do a little like entire Wulfen type of kill team where every dude's kind of starting to go a bit feral. Probably doesn't make much sense lore-wise maybe, but I think it would be really fun. Yeah, as always guys, you know all the YouTubey stuff, membership, Patreon, like, subscribe, bell notifications, all that kind of good stuff. Hit all those buttons, follow me on social medias, and yeah, like I said, you know what to do, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.